Hi guys, welcome to a new video. Thanks for joining me today. Today I have another tutorial kind of video for you. It's a sped up video of a rose that I drew with polychromos on PASTELMAT. So this real-time tutorial is available on Patreon, and in this video I wanted to talk you through the pros and cons that I found when working with colored pencil on PASTELMAT. You know, PASTELMAT is made for pastels, but this year I started drawing with colored pencils on it and I really like it. And I will walk you through this rose a little bit and tell you the pros and cons that I found compared to working with pastels, and also compared to working with colored pencil on regular white paper, which I also do. So I hope you enjoy. So first of all, again, I'm working with polychromos, Faber-Castell polychromos on brown PASTELMAT. It's not a very large drawing, it's a pretty small drawing. It was a study which took about 1 hour, and this type of drawing is a really good one to get or to do if you want to get into a new medium. A rose, very, very nice thing to draw. I love drawing roses. So if you want to get into working with colored pencil on PASTELMAT, this would be a really good project to start with. So I started out with a sketch, just a freehand sketch. For that I did use a pastel pencil because it's a little easier to make corrections with. So that's a difference that I found. The colored pencil is oil-based, or the polychromos are oil-based, and the pastel pencils are not. They are just pressed pigments. They are very easy to blur out, smudge out. And with colored pencil, you don't have that. So that's one thing that's a difference. But on PASTELMAT, you do have a little bit more room for corrections with colored pencil. They layer very well on PASTELMAT, but you still have that difference between pastel pencils that you can't really blend that well. So here I'm just doing that sketch pretty quickly. I didn't spend too much time on it. I chose a starting point. So I chose the bottom petal, a very large petal, and based on that one, I started drawing all the other petals around it. And finally, I drew the stem. I did some erasing with a kneaded eraser. You can't really erase that well on PASTELMAT, but if you don't press too much, also during sketching, you can erase a little bit. And then I started getting into the polychromos right away. So what I noticed when I started working with colored pencil on PASTELMAT for the first time, I noticed how well they layer on the PASTELMAT and how well they stick to it. So here I'm starting out with a rather dark red, and I'm starting by doing the shadows first. So I'm marking all the darker spots within the rose, so that's usually the spaces in between the petals that catch a little less light. So I'm just mapping all those areas out and filling them in a little bit. And that makes it a lot easier to do the rest of the layering as well. So the colors look really, really nice. What I do notice is that the colored pencil get eaten very quickly. So you have to sharpen so often. You have to do that with pastel pencils as well. But with colored pencil, a little bit more, because you can't really smudge, so you have to cover the whole area with the pencil to make sure it's an even coverage. So your pencils really get eaten. I go through my pencils so quickly when I do drawings like this. So that's a little bit of a con. If you're on a low budget, this might not be the best way to draw with colored pencil for you. So then I'm taking an orange or a cadmium red, not sure what it was. So now I'm going to do an even layering on the rest of the petals, leaving open the highlighted areas. So this is more of a medium coverage for the medium areas, so not the darkest ones, not the lightest one. And I'm just putting down a very quick layer, and you can see that the color goes on top of the red very well, so it mixes together a little bit. Moving on to Venetian Red, I think this is. and going over that color again. So you can see that color mixing goes quite well. And you can also see that you can go with light on top of dark a little bit. Light colors show up quite well on top of dark layerings. And that is something you don't have when you work on white paper. So when you work on white regular drawing paper, you have to build up from light to dark. On PASTELMAT, you can work a bit more from dark to light. Though with colored pencil, it is a little bit harder to work from dark to light compared to pastel pencils. So actually working with colored pencils on PASTELMAT feels a little bit like a mix between using pastels and using colored pencils on white paper. It's very different way of working, but really nice. It feels really nice. So then when I filled in all the medium areas, I went in with a little bit of Caput Mortuum Violet to fill in the very darkest areas now. So now I'm going to add the contrast, which will really make the rose pop. You can see that on the reference is in the bottom left. You don't have those very dark spots in between the petals, but I did decide to put that into my drawing because I thought it looked better. You don't have to stick completely to the reference photo if you don't want to. I just decided to add in the things that would make my drawing look better, or that I would think. Alright, so now you can see that the highlighting goes very well, very easy. So I'm using light flesh here, or beige red, and the color changed names, so it's called beige red now. You can see how well that goes on top of the darker layers. And that is something that I like the most about PASTELMAT in general, how easy it is to layer layers and to pull out the highlights again. That is something you can do with both pastel pencils and with colored pencils. And when you work on white drawing paper, that is usually a little less textured, so then the paper just gets filled up quite easily, and you can't add those light textures anymore or light layers. So actually I just like PASTELMAT in general. It's my favorite surface to work on at the moment. I still work on white paper as well, which I still really like, but I think my preference is with PASTELMAT at the moment, both for colored pencils and for pastel pencils. You've seen drawings from me where I've combined the two as well. So I really like to do a pastel background, so a blurry background, which is very easy to do with pastels, and then to do the detailed areas like the head of the animal or something like that with colored pencils. So it's also very easy to combine them and to put colored pencils on top of pastel if you want to. So that's something I would really recommend to try out if you're interested. You can also find some tutorials on Patreon about combining them. I have a wolf, I have a leopard, I have the tiger that I recently finished. So also very nice projects to get into. So now I'm just moving on to doing the final details on the rose itself. So I'm making the colors a little more vibrant, and that's a con I found, by the way. So the colors are less vibrant with colored pencils than they are with pastel pencils. If I had done this rose with pastel pencils, this rose would have been a lot more vibrant in the colors, and it would probably have a little more contrast as well. So that is something, if I want a really nice vibrant looking drawing, I would choose pastel pencils. For this one, this study, I wanted a really nice soft effect, so for that the colored pencils are really nice. Also with colored pencils you have a little more control over smaller details. Doing a little bit more highlighting and darkening up the final shadows as well. It takes a long time before the paper is saturated, so you can basically layer as much as you want until the paper becomes saturated. So if you start adding a bit more pressure onto the paper becomes filled up, and then eventually you can't add any more. You do get a bit of a shine sometimes when working with colored pencils on PASTELMAT if you push too much, especially with the darker colors like dark indigo or black. You do get a glare or shine sometimes that you get with graphite as well. That's something that I don't like. You don't get shines with pastel pencils, so that's something to watch out for when working with colored pencils. So now moving on to the stem. I use multiple colors for the stem. It's important to mix in some other colors with your greens as well to not make it look too unnaturally green. So I chose some greens, and I also added shadows with Payne's Gray, which was a really nice contrast to the greens. And I also add some yellow on the left side. I didn't spend too much time on the stem. So another thing that I do really like, I think this is why I like colored pencil on PASTELMAT better than working on white paper. Drawings don't take a lot of time to make compared to white paper. So this drawing took me 1 hour, which is really fast. If I had done this on white paper, it would have probably taken me at least 3 to 4 hours, something like that. So that's something I really like. On PASTELMAT, both with pastel pencils and colored pencils, you have very quick results. So I'm just adding some more orange. I felt like the rose could use a bit more orange. So I'm adding some dark orange. It's more like a reddish orange. And then eventually, after 1 hour, this drawing was finished. So you can find it on Patreon if you want to check it out for the $10 tier. And on my website you can find a whole overview of all Patreon tutorials, so if you're interested in seeing what I have available first, you can check that out. There's a link in the description, and if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. And then I want to thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.